What's going on, guys? I thought I would do a little experiment test here with some core removal tools, checking them, seeing how well they hold a vacuum, whether or not they leak. I'm on vacation till next weekend, a little extra time on my hands. Thought I would do this. It's something I've thought about for a while. I've heard people on other videos, other YouTube guys on here talking about these, how reliable they are. This one they think leaks, they don't trust it. I've had good luck with this getting cores out. The hole in there is actually large enough down inside between your fittings there for the stem on that core to slide down in there and this thing to grab it. I like being able to see whether I have it or not before I take everything apart and find disappointment and have to put it all back together and try again. So it's worked out good with that, but we're going to try this thing and see how well it holds a vacuum. I've never used that yet, pulling the vacuum on a system. Yellow Jacket, I've had this for a while. This is my second one. I've always had good luck with this for removing and changing core, Schrader cores out, which, I mean, you're not really concerned whether it leaks when you're doing a core replacement. This one sucks at it, actually, the Appion. I have two of those. I keep this one with my hose over there, which I keep all that stored in this Bosch bag. The Bosch drill I had came in that bag. I can slide this thing in there as long as you have your attachment on it that holds it in a tight loop. Drop my core tool in there, close it, zip it up. No need for a $110 Vito hose bag when you have something you've already paid for that'll hold it just fine. But anyway, we're going to try these and we're going to see which one leaks, which one doesn't. Like I said, I've had good luck with this one. This one getting cores out is a struggle, which they tell you you have to pinch these things closed a little bit and adjust them sometimes. And they just, I mean, Schrader core valves are probably like store-bought filters. 20 by 20 might be 19 and 7/8 in one brand, and it might be 20 and 1/8 in another brand. It might be 20 by 20 in one brand, so they all fit different. So this one has always been a struggle for me, so I've only been using it for pulling vacuums. I have two of them. Yellow Jacket, I've always had good luck getting cores out with this, but I've never used it for a vacuum. I bought this when it came out because I like the idea of the glass and the sight glass and being able to see whether you have your core out, not having to go through all the trouble of pulling this thing out and unscrewing it just to be disappointed and find out you didn't get it and put it all back together again and start from scratch. At least here you can see whether you have it or not and bypass that step. But I usually, there's been a couple of times where it's taken maybe 3 shots at it before I got it, but I usually get it. This one, I've sat there and struggled for 15 or 20 minutes trying to get a core out, and I don't like it for that, so I try to strictly use these for vacuum with it. So we're going to use the Robinair 2-stage 5 CFM vacuum pump. I have 2 of these. I got those on eBay, and they were in like new condition, used, and cleaned them, oiling them. I have that one. Then I got another one out there in my building. Saved about $200 really by getting a nice one in used condition off eBay rather than buying a brand new one. And then I have 2 Megaflow hoses that I keep. We're going to use the Navac micron gauge, which is the micron gauge I use. I clean this out with 91% alcohol about every second or third time I use it. Field piece gauges work well pulling vacuums, as long as you take all your ball valves, if you use those, or your low loss fitting type hoses. Use straight hoses, make sure they're tight, make sure your gaskets have been replaced, like the gasket in this, which we're going to use. I've replaced that. That has a specific use, so I don't wear it out and tear it up. Keep my micron gauge always stored in the case it came in, which also stays inside of a Milwaukee pack-out box, so it stays clean, doesn't get banged up. It only comes out when I want to use it, and when it's stored away, it's stored away. It's not getting beaten up. So those are what we're going to use for this test. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hook the hose directly to the vacuum pump. Then I want to hook the other end of the hose to this. That allows me to ball valve and valve off the vacuum and let each one of these core tools and the micron gauge sit isolated, and we're going to see which one drops, which one's we're going to do a decay test basically and see which one holds vacuum the best. Maybe none of them will, maybe all of them will, maybe there's one that everybody thought was a piece of junk when it came to pulling a vacuum. It's going to surprise you, and maybe we're going to find out that one that everybody seems to have always depended on doesn't actually do the job very well. Okay, first we're going to start by pulling a vacuum on our micron gauge, and we'll pull it through this and I'm going to valve it off. And you got to remember, the key to a lot of this stuff is making sure that you do maintenance. Change your gaskets on those. These MegaFlow hoses actually have rebuild kits. You got to have that little tool to get the little spring lock ring out of there so this comes apart. So these do have rebuild kits, so they're kind of like those hoses that have a similar fitting on it for low loss. When you take it off, you get the refrigerant spray, but you have rebuild kits for those because eventually those things start leaking. So you have to do the same thing for these. Anybody uses these Appion MegaFlow hoses, remember that there is a rebuild kit for each one of these fittings to make sure they're not leaking. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to hook up directly to our ball valve, and then we are going to, on the NAVAC gauge, you'll just hold that down for a few seconds, make sure it's zeroed. If it's zeroed, you'll get all those dots. So if you turn it on, you see a number, hold your calibrate button down for about 5 seconds, it'll zero itself, and then obviously you want to make sure you're set for your proper measurement scale. So that's on there snug, this is on here snug, and then we're going to turn this pump on after I plug it up, and we're going to make sure this is good. Alright, so we are now connected to power, and let's turn it on. Oh, let me turn my GFI on. And I have an alarm set on this, so when it gets down below 500 microns, it will go off. And you see how far down it goes. So I've been pulling a direct vacuum on this micron gauge for about 4 minutes, and we're only down to 218, 17. So I'm already suspecting that I may have a problem with this, and that's where the concern comes in. Typically when I pull a vacuum, I'm going to hook directly to the suction line and the core tool that is there, and then I'm going to connect this through another fitting to my liquid line and pull my vacuum down. But this ball valve, I'm going to go ahead and turn it off, see what happens. Close the ball valve, and you look at that number starting to shoot right back up. So I either have a problem with my micron gauge or this ball valve attachment. So let's find out which one it is. Alright guys, so what I did is I swapped this one out for just a regular 45-degree ball valve. Has a new gasket in it. These are the ones I keep on my high side hoses on my manifold gauges. So what we're looking for is a baseline here. So before I was struggling to get down to 200, so now I'm down to 142. So I know that leaks a little bit, but you got to remember when you're pulling a vacuum, if you're doing it with this kind of setup, your hose is going to be connected to your core tool on your suction side, and this is going to be your ball valve. Whether it's this one, which I can't turn it because it's all the way in there, but you got a valve here, and the Appion has a valve. So if we're pulling a vacuum, so we're down to 141, we're going to do a decay test and kind of set a baseline. But your ball valve in an actual situation is not going to be this. It's going to be whatever valve's on your core tool. And then that's what's going to hold the vacuum between there, through the refrigerant circuit, back to your micron gauge, which will be directly connected to your liquid line. So we're just setting a baseline on how well these perform against something like this, or if it can pull the vacuum all the way down to the 130s or not. So I'm gonna go ahead and valve this off, and you're gonna see a rise. That's normal. And we're valved off, but you don't want to go back above 500 microns. And you can see I've got this one valved off. We're up to 210, and it may go all the way up to 300 or 400 before it stabilizes out. But you want to stay below your 500. Some people say 1,000. Some books I've read, pull your vacuum, get it down, valve it off, do your 10-minute decay test. As long as it stays below 1,000, you're good. We're going to kind of test it to that, but I'm shooting for 500. So right now, with just this, we're into low 300s. So let's see how these perform. All right, guys, the first one up to bat is going to be the Yellow Jacket. See how quickly we can get down to the 150 range. Alright guys, we're about a minute and a half later. We're at 141, 140 basically. Now we're going to valve it off and see how well it reacts to a decay test. It's going up. And that was a Yellow Jacket ball valve that was on there. So it appears to be pretty comparable. We'll let it sit there for a few minutes and see what it does. So now we're about 3 minutes into a decay test, and we're up to 470, 480. And I'm not going to guarantee you that there's not a little bit of leakage in this. It's always been fairly reliable. And the alarm's going off because it's just set at 550 for my alarm. But it continues to go up a little bit. Let's see if it breaks 1,000. So we're about 3 minutes later, and we're up in the low to mid 700s. Now, the ball valve that I had on there didn't get that high, so that lets me know that my micron gauge is probably fine. It may be this core tool. And now we're up at 800. Vacuum pump's off. It's just isolated to the core tool. So Yellow Jacket, Let's try the Appion next. Alright, so now we have the Appion connected. And we'll let it get down into that same 140, 150 range and see how well it holds a decay test. Alright, we're about 4 minutes later, and the Appion is down to 128. Now keep in mind, every time I replace one of these and put another one on, some humidity does get in this line. It does get in these tools because It's been sprinkling and raining, so we're working under conditions that have some moisture involved. But now we're down to 126. Let's go ahead and valve it off and see how well it does on the decay test. And it's holding pretty steady. It's going up a little bit, but not, well, there we go. Went up a little bit. But it seems to be holding right around that 200 range. Let's turn the pump off. Make sure we don't have any leakage through there with the pump pulling a vacuum. But it's holding much better than the Yellow Jacket did and the ball valve by itself. So it seemed to have pulled a little bit deeper of a vacuum as well. So the Appion, after pulling the vacuum down and valving it off, and the valve is where you're really going to get the majority of your leakage. We're up to 280, still well below 500. 298, 300. Seems to be kind of stabilizing better than the Yellow Jacket did. But I mean, we're holding, once we get our vacuum pulled down properly, it's holding that vacuum for a decay test. So let's see what this one does. Alright, let's try the Fieldpiece Sight Glass core tool. Make sure everything's closed tight on it. Everything is good and tight. And let's see what it does. Let me get this one down and we'll see how well it does at the decay test. Alright guys, so we've waited the standard 3 to 4 minutes, and the Fieldpiece core tool, which you can see is straightly directed through my hose back to the pump right there, is pulled lower than the other two, the Yellow Jacket and the Appion, in that same time period. So let's see how well it performs on a decay test. So we're going to go ahead and close the valve, turn off the pump, and see how it does. So it's not definitely going up as quickly as the Yellow Jacket, and it's not going up as quickly as the Appion. It is going up a little bit, but it's just creeping a little bit. Not bad. As much flack as I've seen people give this core tool, it seems to be holding fairly well. So I'm pretty sure my micron gauge is fine. My pump is fine. But you've got to remember the outliers. Everywhere you have a connection, if you're using these large megaflow type hoses, you do have rebuild kits. They do get worn out. They do leak after a period of time. You have to rebuild them. So a lot of it is just maintenance, making sure everything you're using is in proper operational order. You can't just point the finger at something and say that's the problem. It could be a valve fitting. We saw this one didn't work very well. It just shot right up. But you're not going to use these if you're doing a proper vacuum. Your ball valve is going to be at your core tool when you let it sit connected to the suction line. This will be connected basically in most residential systems. You're going to put that on your liquid line. You're going to pull a vacuum through the whole system back to your micron gauge. Don't hook your micron gauge directly to this fitting on your pump, because your pump's pulling a direct vacuum on the gauge. It's not going to give you an accurate reading of what's going on in the actual system you're pulling a vacuum on. So we're up to 289, and it's pretty much leveled out right in that area. So this is good for getting the cores out, not necessarily pulling a vacuum. It's serviceable. It'll work. You can do it. It did have a 300 or 400 rise and kind of got in that 500 to 600 range and stabilized out. This one held pretty good. This one is holding better than this one did. So the Yellow Jacket's holding better than the Appion. So keeping gaskets changed, keeping your hoses maintained, making sure there's no contaminants in them. I'm out here doing this while it's raining, so we're definitely doing this under a test, because every time I disconnect one of these, moisture gets back into this. Got to pull it out. So it's very similar, somewhat, to pulling a vacuum on an HVAC system, but this thing's leveled out at 350 microns, and it's holding pretty steady. So you got to remember, guys, it's not always pointing the finger and blaming a tool. How well do you take care of your tools? How well do you take care of your hoses? Because it's not just your micron gauge, it's not just your core tool valve, it's your hoses, the fittings. If you're using these Appion Mega Flow hoses, these large hoses, they're good, but they're rebuild kits. These things do leak after a while. If you're not rebuilding them, that can be your problem getting the vacuum pulled down. So it's not always a tool to point the finger at. How well you're maintaining your equipment and your parts and everything you use to do your job. So anyway, guys, I think the field piece is perfectly fine. At least mine is. It works well on a vacuum. It works well getting the cores out. The Yellow Jacket works well getting the cores out. Fairly decent job pulling a vacuum. Probably won't use it on a vacuum. The Appion does a good job pulling a vacuum, but getting cores out is really aggravating. So you got to pick your poison, guys. But I've got to tell you, when it comes to pulling a vacuum, I'm probably going to continue to use my Appion, and if I need to, I'm going to use this field piece because I think it works perfectly fine. That's my opinion, guys. Have yours, but maintain all of your tools, hoses, fittings, connections, gaskets. It all comes into play, and the fewer connections you have that can cause a leak makes a difference. Appreciate you watching, guys. Like, subscribe. Have a good one.